Stuff is no good. There we go. Oh.
Is that all right?
Yeah, for
all right. Don't
until
worry.
I sneeze.
Don't worry. No one do anything. All right. So my name's Paul. Sorry we're late. We just got caught up. We were somewhere on Smith Road. So yes, recovery people. How many? You mind putting up so I know? All right. Great. Great. All right. So I think we're going to do a little bit. See, the spirit of the non-duality is in the talk of the recovery. Because if you look at recovery from alcoholism and addiction, in the big book of AA, they brought it to that it's extreme self-centeredness or obsession with self. That's the root of the problem. All we're doing is taking it back a little farther. Because in my own experience with it, I've been sober now 30 years, my own experience with it, I found that the obsession over being you is really an activity to reinforce the identification as the image of you, yeah? So you could say the identification isn't really with the body, but the body is what produces the convincing of the story. The identification as self is the identification as the thinker, the feeler, the doer, the haver, the loser, yes? It's that sense. Oh, there you go. Well, you know, maybe we're not meant to record it anyway.
I can hold it and record it?
Why don't you hold it, yeah. Make sure it's still on red there. See, it should say video.
Yep.
Great. So, the idea that happened with me was about 8 years into recovery, just around there. Something had been changing in the head, and then I was leading 4-step workshops in San Francisco for a long, long time. And I used to always speak out of how it works, because that's where it is. And the 4-step is the inventory process of AA for the people that are not in recovery. Because everyone's recovering from something, basically. But the inventory process is the 4th step of the recovery program. And it's just a basic inventory that people do when they come into recovery. And a lot of people give it a lot of meanings. One of the meanings I like is you're going to look at how self has defeated you in this life. This idea of being a someone, this idea of being the doer, the thinker, the feeler, the haver, yeah? The identification as a body. So being convinced that self, so the idea of we're going to look at how self has defeated us. And so right before he goes into how to do the inventory, he has a statement where it says, being convinced, which is a present tense condition. Like right now, it isn't, I was convinced, or I'm going to be convinced, or I hope I will be convinced. It's being convinced, so you're in it, yeah? And what are you being convinced of? You are being convinced of that self, manifested in various ways, is what has defeated us, yeah? So if you listen to the statement, he's not saying, and self isn't, I don't believe self is an idea of an ego or anything like that, because when people talk about an ego, they say, I have an ego and I want to lose the ego. What's that feeling of having and losing the ego? That's the bondage of self, yeah? It's an activity. So it says, being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, is what has defeated us. So in this statement, we're the us, yeah? And then there's this thing, or there's this modality, or I like to look at it as a parasitical movement, a mental parasitical movement, or a foreign installment. So that foreign installment, yeah, has defeated us, manifested in various ways. And so if you're convinced of that, we're going to look at this foreign installment's manifestations in our life. And then the next paragraph is resentment, yeah? Now, it's so easy to see that the real dilemma is the act of being identified as self, yeah, or as this foreign installment, because when the foreign installment manifests through us, we call them ours, yeah. So it says the common manifestations of self in our life are resentment, fear, and harming other people in the pursuit of what we want, yes. So those 3 characteristics are manifestations of self. They're not our manifestations. They're self's manifestations, yeah? Yet, when people talk about resentments, they call them mine, my fears. So I humbly believe the real activity of the disease that actually causes all the other addictions, which is the mental disease, the addiction to being a self, causes the other addictions, because every time I used, I was basically trying to get out of myself, really. Yeah? But the dilemma was I was trying to get out of myself as self. Yeah? Therefore, it doesn't work. So in a way, you have to see self as a foreign installment. Why? Because we're in the act of being identified as it. That's why the antidote is based on the seeming problem. Because it's the act of being identified as it, you have to see it as something other than you. Yeah? So that's what clearly happened with me when I was about 8 or 9 years sober. I was reading that sentence, and I saw self as something other than me. Yeah? I saw self, and I saw us as something other than self. Yeah? And as soon as I saw it as something other than me, a possibility became available, which is I can be free from it. Yeah? And as soon as I entertained that, I had a sudden, like, going over years and years of living, and I saw I had been trying to be free as it most of my life. Since about 6 years old, I have been trying to get out of self as self. That was the main dilemma. So as soon as that was corrected, and to me, the obsession with self is just used to reinforce the identification as self. Yeah? Because the identification of self isn't obvious, it isn't natural, it's forced. So you're trying to bond, let's say you want to call it spirit, with a thing. You're trying to take spirit, no thing, and make it a thing. It never can bound, it can never be glued, but what happens is the mental state and all the interpretations of what's going on are a constant application of glue. So every time you look, it looks like it's the same. If you would pause and see, you would see it isn't. But because when we just go in there and look with the eyes of blindness, we think I'm that. But if you know in AA we talk about the pause, if you saw it from the pause, you would see it as an activity. You would see it as something foreign. You would see it, So the main point was I saw it as something else, and then the possibility of being free from it occurred. And since that day, the horse has been in front of the cart. Yes? And therefore, my desire to be free isn't a future goal, it's a possibility now. Yeah? So my idea of a higher power now is it's always available at all times, right where I am, with no requirement necessary. And my idea of a higher power has changed quite a lot, where I'm not turning my will and life over to the care of a power greater of my own understanding. I'm turning my will and life over to the care of a power of its own understanding. I don't want a higher power of my own understanding, because there will be still a higher power. And the dilemma is, if you look at the 12 steps as a linear approach, because there's 1 to 12, and you would say the third step is the most profound principle in the 12 steps, right? Turning your will and life over to the care of higher power, and where they put the huge amount of emphasis on that. Well, in the book, there's something that says to be first before that, which is first, you got to quit playing God, and then next in this drama of life, God is going to be the director, will be the directed, and God is just an indication, is pointing. It's a power greater than self, yeah? So first is quit playing God. Now, what's playing God? How does it look? All right, when you wake up in the morning and you your head tells you how the day's going to be, isn't that playing God? When you wake up in the morning, it says this day's going to suck. It's only 8 a.m. You haven't even rolled out. It's already forecasted the events of the day, actually for years. Isn't that playing God? All right, so right now, the selfing is in the act of playing God, yeah? Right now, there's hearing this message, there's hearing what's happening, and then there's something that's claiming to be the hearer of what's happening. So we're hearing what's happening. We are the hearing, the seeing, the feeling, the tasting, the touching. But the mental state arises and says, I'm the one that's hearing this message. Yeah? And that which is saying, I'm the hearer of the message, is that which is playing God. So when that which is playing God hears the message, you got to quit playing God, what happens? When that which is playing God tries to quit playing God, that's playing God. Ad infinitum. You can never get out once you're in. Yeah? Once the wrong, not the wrong, that which is playing God hears quit playing God, that's playing fucking God. And therefore you go into the third step with that as your God, and then your idea of turning your will and your life over is a conditional agreement. I'm going to turn it over, but if it's not looking like it's going the way I want, I'm going to take it back. So it's not surrendered, it's like a conditional surrender. I give it away. Oh, wait a minute, I want to meet a girl. I'm not going to let God set up who my girlfriend is. I want her to look a certain way. I take it back. Then the shit hits the fan, and I believe, well, I'll just surrender again. But you may get lost in the wilderness for fucking years. So to me, when you see you're not that which is playing God, that's quitting playing God, because God doesn't have to play God. Yeah? What you are doesn't have to play something it is. Yeah? So suddenly now, it's very, 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 very clear, and when the third step is seen, that decision is made, and the incredible thing is, if this was your life and your will, the program would have stopped at step 3. You would have turned your will and your life over to the care of a higher power. End of story. But the thing is, at this moment, when we're taken over by alcoholism, our life and our will isn't our life and our will. It's been taken over by the alcoholism. Yeah? So basically, we're in occupied territory. So the best we can do is make a decision about turning our will and life over to the care of higher power. And that decision is given power through 4 and 9. So the working steps trigger the transfer where a power greater than self, that's all that's necessary, because the only thing that self respects is a power greater than it. So suddenly 4 through 9 opens up a portal or a possibility that a power greater than self can enter the fray. And when that little dog that's been masquerading as a big dog meets the big dog, the little dog rolls over. Yeah? And now you have what? Freedom from the bondage of self on a daily reprieve contingent on your spiritual condition or the maintenance thereof. And if you're not a body, then you are spirit. So the spiritual condition is being the condition. Not doing and efforting, but being it. And consciousness, if you watch what consciousness is doing now, it's seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching through all of us. It's not sweating. It's been seeing so much. It's not like I'm seeing, I mean, how can I do all 5 at once? Seeing, hearing, feeling. It's go here, go, you know, push this, move that. No. It's being conscious. Beingness doesn't demonstrate thought and effort. Being is being. Yeah? And if you just watch the event of your baseline, which is seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, you have no volition over any of it. If I'm looking this way with my eyes open, I'm going to see what's ever in front of me. Even if I took a vow never to see you, I just saw you. Yeah. And if you want an example, just one tiny example, listen to people talk. A feeling happens. The mental state arises after the feeling and says, I didn't want to feel that. But what came first? The consciousness of the feeling. Then the idea it was you feeling it comes later. If you were rooted in before, you would see that what you're calling the before you would see it as an activity later. Yeah? And if you see it as not you, you're going to lose interest in it. You can't lose interest in it setting out to try to lose interest in it. That would be interest in it. You have to just lose interest in it because it's not you. Yeah? And so this happened in that year, and then over time I saw that statement in page 84 where it says you're going to have some events where the problem will not exist for you anymore, but they're still mostly experiences. It can stabilize if the problem doesn't exist as you. So when you see you're not that, the possibility of those experiences of being free from it completely become more and more available. Yeah? And so what happened is, over these years, as an observation of 19 years of living or something like that, what I can say is, there's been a stabilized traveling lighter with whatever life had in store for this action figure. So everything has happened. My friends have died with cancer. I've had this and that, money, no money. But whatever life had in store for me, I've traveled lighter over it. What more do you freaking want? So the irritability, restlessness, and discontent is shifted from that as a baseline to a somewhat ease and comfort. And therefore, when you're content and satisfied, you see things completely different than when you're irritable, restless, and discontent. Yes? Mm-hmm. And there aren't thousands of resentments out there. They're perceptual tricks. You see a threat when there isn't a threat and it reminds you of a past threat that you supposedly had. A resentment means you re-feel something. Well, we resent, we rethink, we rehash, we redo. We're reing all fucking day. We're like in a spin cycle and we never get out of it. Yeah? It's like the same old, except with different nouns, you know. Instead of Mary, it's Susie, you know. But look at it, you're in 20 relationships, let's say 15, none of them worked out, and you're the only constant in all of them. Yeah? You got to see something. There's a little hint there. Yeah? You're rolling things. Seriously. And so this happens, you know. It wasn't I would have been a circuit speaker if this hadn't happened. I swear. It ruined my career in AA. Because it's difficult, because here's the message. This message is selfing. Doesn't particularly like it a lot. Some people like it, but when they go home and think about it, they don't like it. So, but I believe you are that, and I believe you've been served the spiritual subpoena already. I believe you got it when I walked in. You don't even have to notice it. You've got it, and in fact, that which you are has heard what it needed to hear. Because if you keep trying to be what you are from what you're not, it's not going to go anywhere. But if you can see what you're not from what you are, that goes somewhere. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So if you can look at the parasite from what you are, instead of looking for what you are from the parasite, it changes the whole ball game of recovery. Yeah? And then the steps make perfect sense. Yeah? The first step is powerless. I'm powerless over alcohol and whatever else. And my life has become unmanageable. Now, when I came in, I believed, the way I read that first step, I thought if I stopped drinking, everything would get manageable. I was in for a rude awakening. It didn't work out that way because that doesn't work for me, that step. If I would change anything in the 12 steps, it would be my managing caused me to drink. My managing is what made life unmanageable. I'm just not managerial quality. Yeah? So the idea of powerlessness means, in my view, that you're dancing with a gorilla and you're going to stop when the gorilla wants to stop. Yeah? You may not be in the dance, but as long as it's fucking, you're going to do it. And this is what trips me out, though. If you're powerless over something, then are you truly responsible for what happens? You're accountable in this world, but are you responsible? So, if I'm powerless, when I used to drink and use, I was apt to do anything to anybody unless you could physically stop me, yeah? What flips me out is why so many of us in the community are still letting the parasite harvest crops of guilt and shame based on the shit that it drove us to do. Yeah? So if you look at now, when you come into AA, a lot of us, you get the sense that a power greater than you is doing for you what you can't do for yourself, and when things are going the way they're going, you're giving gratitude towards that, and you're feeling like, wow, it's grace, and tons of coincidences happen, some people in AA, I know their whole life is indirectly or directly based on AA. The wife they married, the jobs, and everything came from AA. And we all have that seeming ability that we can go, well, God, it's God's grace, you know, God takes it. Why aren't we applying that same attitude to the small God that had us before we were sober? We keep fucking claiming and taking all the guilt and shame for the shit we did then, but now we're not taking any credit for the shit that's happening now. We're just under a different power, yeah? Why not apply that sense of freedom from ownership of what happened now when it's all good to the incredible incarceration by owning all the shit? You can't say it's foreign. We're doing it on the, let's say, the brighter side, aren't we? I mean, hey, God's doing for me what I can't do for myself. But something that other God did to me what I wouldn't do to myself. Did to me what I wouldn't do to myself. Allowed me to do this shit that I would never do to anyone else. Yeah? Why isn't it that? Why don't we see that? Why is there so much guilt and shame, even though the statement in AA, the first step, says powerless? You were powerless over what was going to happen. Yet, the mental state's harvesting fucking crops all day from those fields of what you did back then. There's so much more freedom in the first step if you can see it. And we're doing it concerning like surrendering over all this stuff to God now. Why not say, hey, listen, I'm tired of fucking taking a rap for all that shit. I'm going to pin it on the parasite. Yeah, as it said, the past, you know, I don't shut the door on it, but I sure don't send my fucking farm tractors in there to harvest guilt and shame. Oh, I would, you know, don't shut the door, stuff like that. Why not? That's because I saw I was powerless. I'm not doing that same behavior now to people. Remember, we used to go out, I don't know, there's a lot of addicts here. Used to go out looking pretty good, you know, maybe Monday night. Monday night, you're looking pretty good. And let's say your thing is cocaine, you know. And so I was used to intravenously use it. So maybe Thursday, you've been up for 3 days, you know, and you've run out of money, and you're in a little place, everyone's sitting in their chairs, and they've shot their individual things, and everyone's sort of running out, and then suddenly one of them starts looking down on the rug and thinks he sees cocaine, yeah? He remembers someone went by in the hallway about 6 months before, and he was sure he dropped some. So he starts going down here, starts looking, you know, finds lint, he thinks it's cocaine, starts dandruff, everything. You know what I mean? We're being driven by something. No one's going to go all fours looking at lint, like an archaeological study. Was this coke at one time? Is there at least 1%? Something drove us to those positions. Just like the heights we reach in quote-unquote spirituality or spiritual condition in AA, something has drove us to those conditions. Why is there one driver in this but not the driver there? Then the light of the powerlessness, the real freedom from seeing you are powerless could come over you now. It's not there to massage the past. No, the past is what it is in of itself. It's how the past is still lived now. You could be free. That's a bone I have now of the community. Because you have the ability. I have the ability. It's easy to give the praise to something. Well, why not do the same to what's happened to us under the parasite? We were taken over. If you took all of us here, yeah, all different ethnicities, let's say, different upbringings, different education, and the addiction takes us over, a lot of us end up at the same 3 parking spaces: institution, jails, and death. Yeah? There's one driver of the whole fleet. Each single car thinks it's a special car. It's like that ride in Disney World where there's like, you should know something's up when you get on the boat. There's 9 steering wheels, but you get in there and you're supposedly the captain, and you're going down a waterway, and then you make a left, you think you make a left, and then you run into a hippo, but then you make a, and you get away. So you get the pride, oh, I escaped the hippo, and then a crocodile, and then, oh, this. But, you know, everyone's thinking they're the fucking captain. It's a big bar underneath, and someone's got a computer in some room, and it's doing it. But your whole narrative is fucking give up the wheel. It's like you have an incredible engine and you keep it in stall. It stalls. You constantly let the parasite stall it because it has you. It still has you in the sense of being the doer. Yeah, and you're not. There's no forgiveness. You'll forgive everyone else. You'll make all your amends, but you'll still keep yourself on that hook. So I'm just going to go through a quick 12 steps, yeah? So the first step is that powerlessness and then the unmanageability. To me, the unmanageability was caused by my management, yeah? And the thing is, the type I was, when I managed my own life, it led me to having to be managed by other people. I had to go into programs. I had to be supervised, yeah? And the alcoholic of my type is I'm willing to pay any consequence tomorrow not to feel uncomfortable now. And that's the imperative. With active alcoholism, there's a fucking raw urge there that I am apt to do anything to get some relief, immediate relief. I don't give a damn about what happens tomorrow. Because when I feel bad, it feels like it's gonna last forever, yeah? The mental state plays us like a violin. It stretches out things in time, yeah? And if you see, everyone here who doesn't have addiction, we all are saddled with self-centeredness, yeah? But as someone who has self-centeredness without addiction, it's like they have the acoustic version. When you have the addiction, it's like the electric version, which is a lot of long solos in a Gata Davidas. You know, that's the only difference. It's the same modality, but we have an extreme version or an amplified version of self-centeredness, yes? So the first step, I really humbly, the powerlessness, I remember the first amends snuck up on me. I was in a room with some friends. We had passed a lady coming up the stairs, and she had paint on her pants. My friend went out, and I was a house painter, and he came back in. He says, oh, my neighbor would like to talk to you, and I thought she wanted some painting advice. She came into the room, and she said, hello, Paul, do you remember me? I go, no. She says, you owe me $500. And I had stiffed her. She had moved into my house one time, but she had gained a lot of weight. I didn't recognize her, and I used her deposit. She deposited it to me, not to the owner. And so she caught me with my pants down. Fuck, I'm trying to impress this girl and my other friends. Hey, shit, oh, fuck. But I didn't feel any guilt or shame whatsoever because I had gotten the disease. I had gotten the first step. I knew that what I did to her, I would have done to anybody, unless you could stop me. I saw the working of an understanding of the first step. I got the tactile fucking traction in life. I did not have guilt and shame when she called me out on something because I knew I would have done it to anybody. This is the possibility. Why keep your recovery here? Let it clean the past. There's so much of our energy holed up in there. Yeah? Why not clean it there? Have a sense of, did you actually do all those fucking things? Or were you driven to the points of doing them? So, all right, so the second step to me is an observational step. Other people have a lot of ideas about it. But to me, it says, we came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And that sanity is concerning the first drink, the sanity before the first drink. It's not about all your crazy little things, but the insanity that precedes the first drink. Yeah? That's what you get restored to. All right? So what I did is I came to AA. People said, hey, why don't you come back? I said, okay, I hope you're right. So I started making decisions on hope. And they said, get a sponsor. I said, well, maybe not now, you know. Then they said, sit in the front, listen to people. I did all that. And I did all the suggestions. And that hoping they were right turned into a belief quickly, because AA delivers the goods, and then it turned into a faith. And I had already come to believe because I had not drank in 8 weeks, yeah, which I could not possibly do on my own. But coming in AA, I had not touched alcohol or drugs for 8 weeks. So I had come to believe that a power greater than myself had restored me to sanity, because it had. I didn't have to do anything else. I saw that, and then you move right to the third step, which is turning one's will over to the care of a higher power. Yeah? That's it. That's what it is. And it's a decision, because you don't have your life and will. It's taken over by the parasite. Yes? You don't have it yet. So you're just making a decision, and then 4 through 9 is what activates the power to initiate that decision to be made, to give it flesh and blood. So when someone sings the glory of the third steps, they've usually done all the steps. Yeah. So 4 through 9 are the working steps to sort of diminish the mental condition so the spiritual condition can become obvious, right? Not to the mental condition, to be obvious to itself as the spiritual condition. Do not waste any time trying to make your mental and physical state spiritual. It's not their calling, yeah? You are spirit. So when the mental obsession diminishes, then the obviousness of what you are becomes what? Obvious, yeah? So now you have that feeling of a new power flowing, you sense this presence, you learned how to face life successfully, you have a new employer, being all-powerful, it's going to take care of you. All you got to do is 2 requirements. Stay close to it, and you can't be far from everywhere. So that requirement's already met. And then do its works well, so do some freaking service. That's it. That's the requirement, and it says you'll be taken care of as this little action figure if you do that. All right, that's the deal. And has it been true for you? Yes. It's been true to me for 30 years. Yes. Yeah. What is the point that when are you going to be convinced? Or are you attempting to convince that which can never be convinced? In the innermost, which is not the mental state, there's convincing. Yeah? It's in the innermost, that's where the real admittance of powerlessness gains traction. Not up here. I admitted I was alcoholic tons of times to get another drink. I admitted I was a drug addict to get some cocaine. No, it's the admittance in the innermost, yes? Not up here, but what we really are. And that can be convinced, yeah? That day I get downloaded, I got struck sober in a trailer park, Calistoga, on a regular day at the office, just trying to stay loaded until I could get high. And I was up against that Mount Everest of many, many users in the last months of their using. I had no money to do what I wanted, so I'd have to convince others to do what I wanted. And my batting average of success was going down precipitously, convincing others. So I was one fucking angry person, because I couldn't even get what I wanted. Well, there I was, and I came to, so to speak. I had been gone, one of those blackouts. I came to. I didn't know how I met this guy, but there I was in a trailer with him. I was sitting and he had a big head and a bulbous nose with big varicose veins all over his face. And we're passing a bottle of vodka, Royal Gate vodka. I don't think you have it on this coast. It is, it's probably Smirnoff here, but it's cheap. So we're passing this bottle, and I looked at him, and I said to myself, this guy's a bum, you know? But lo and behold, he was seeing me as a bum, it seemed to me. And something happened, and almost like a portal opened, and something downloaded, not to this, but to the innermost. And it was like a CNN news flash, just a headline, and the headline was, I'm fucked, yeah? Literally. Now, it was news to me, but it wasn't news to everyone who knew me, yeah? And what happened is, that has never come up for review like every 3 years. It's never. There's no debate about it. I realized I'm just not managerial quality. And from that point on, the whole seed of sobriety downloaded. And then it introduced me to the way it was going to find expression here, which was AA the next day. So I didn't get sober through AA. I came into AA sober. I stayed sober through AA. The sobriety downloaded, but it needed a way of life to express, and AA is the way of life to stay sober. And it just keeps playing out. And I've never had a strong urge or a thought about getting drunk or loaded ever again. So the problem truly has not existed for me, which is mind-boggling. I mean, that's worthy of the term solution. I think a lot of solutions are peddled around here that aren't solutions. They demand so much freaking work and effort. This thing is truly the easiest off the way. Yeah? So the fourth step is when you really feel like you join AA, because you haven't done anything yet, really. The first three, they're more reflective. The fourth step, you're asked to do something, which is write a simple inventory of how self has defeated us. Yeah? And so, as I said earlier, the way I looked at it at first was somehow, I didn't know what they were talking about, but I knew self was me. Yeah? Somehow I had something to do with it, and I really fucked up and shit like that. And I saw like who I was mad at and why, but I didn't see my role in it, yeah? So I think everyone who's getting drunk tonight in Doylestown does the first two columns of the fourth step. They know who they're mad at and why, but it just leads to another drink. AA just takes it back another way to see your role in it, and that's where the relief is, yeah? So I finally saw my role in it through listening to the Joe and Charlie guys. You ever hear of them? If you haven't, I'd recommend checking it out on the internet. It's still available. These two old dudes in AA would go around giving 4-day big book seminars. And by hearing them explain it, it made a whole lot more sense than when I read it, or when I read it with my sponsor, yeah? And I was also there at this thing with 600 people who were enthusiastic about sobriety. Yeah, they were really into it. And when they explained the fourth step on Saturday morning, I understood how first column was connected to me. And I ran to my motel room and I did another fourth step with understanding, and that was hugely different. And that's really the drive that I do in AA. I want to just share an understanding, because understandings have been incredibly helpful for me. When I understood something, it opened up other possibilities, yeah. And so I saw my role in things, and then that role in things was actually the parasite masquerading as me. But first, I had to own it to disown it. I can't start at disowning it, because that's a fucking way of trying to avoid something. I owned it completely. I let everything land on me, and then I realized I was not that, yeah. And so the difference between a resentment and my resentment is huge. My resentment is a 40-year fucking altar, you know, that you put your failed marriages on, fucking losing that job and everything. But a resentment comes and goes. Yeah. My fears, fucking, you probably made tons of calls all week to other people about your fears. Fears are much different, much easier to travel through. The my is where the bondage of self occurs. The my. It attaches to the fear and amplifies it. It attaches to the resentment and lengthens it. It gives it life. It extends it in time. Some people have been entertaining resentments for 50 years. They have a miracle at 9 in the morning. They forget it at 10, but they're remembering a resentment of 40 years ago. You've got to see there's something off. That thing that's the GPS of your life is a failed GPS. It wants to take you to its destination, not your destination. And its destination is fuck it. It wants to take you to fuck it, because if you get to fuck it, you're apt to do almost anything. And that's really the surrender of alcoholism, is fuck it. An act of alcoholism is trying to lead you to the point to go against all the evidence that's there not to have a drink, that it makes fucking sense to get loaded again. Yeah? And if you take it to be you, you're going to fall for that swoon. See, if you could hear alcoholism as Stanley's and you're Paul, you'd have immunity. But because the alcoholism talks to you as you, That's why we listen to it, really. You wouldn't listen if it was anyone else saying this shit to you, but you listen like a freaking devoted saint when it's about you. Yeah, that's the bondage of self, and that's where the relief of AA works. You lose interest in self and you gain interest in others, or other, yeah? That's the freedom of it. So I'm going to rush through. Fourth step, you know it all anyway. 4 columns, you look at fear, resentments, harms done to other people, usually looking at your sexual behavior, yeah? And you see your role in things, and then all this stuff you share with another person or someone, and hopefully you start seeing the patterns of how self has defeated us. And to me, the most workable steps when you're sober, especially as you get on in years, is 6 and 7. Yeah, because if I'm at a meeting and because it's not my alcoholism, if anything, it's our alcoholism. So when someone's sharing about alcoholism and it hits me, I do immediately, I go, hey, I'm entirely ready to have this removed or reconfigured, I like better, and then I ask that power to do it. And I believe to do 6 and 7 in a meeting setting, there's a lot more juice. There's that loving God that's appearing throughout group conscience. So there's a lot of juice. And the thing is, I believe in 6 and 7, the quicker you can catch it out of the oven, the better. You don't want it to be like a forensic unit going over. It's already freaking, no. You want to catch it as it's happening. And when you see it and you surrender that, you don't manage it, you surrender it, things change, yes? And suddenly now, instead of realizing you shouldn't be in the house after you paid a 20-year mortgage, you see the blueprint making the house, yeah? So now the pause becomes incredibly influential, and the pause is our really first appearance of what we really are in our own life. That's what we are. We are the pause. We are that spiritual, eternal moment. And if you can see your own life, how just 2 pauses can change your whole life. If you could just have a pause just before you pulled that fucking trigger or fucking had that extra drink or something like that, or said that stupid thing, things could have gone totally different. That pause becomes the norm now. So 6 and 7, 8, again, in AA we just write a list of who we've harmed, because amends, it's very, very freeing. And I'll give you the example how it worked with me. I was running around San Francisco, and I lived in an area called North Beach. And I used to go to a marketplace called Rossi's Market, and I would steal 2 16 cans of beer for the front and a steak in the back, right? With a long thing. And I'd get out, and that would be my food and then my carbohydrates until I could try to get some drugs. And I'd do it like every day almost, like months, you know, with the long run in there and go. So there was a meeting in North Beach, and in San Francisco, very difficult to find parking. Yeah, but I would drive there on 30 nights to go to this meeting, but I would never go on the street where Rossi's Market was. Yeah, I would just avoid it at all costs, and I'd park somewhere. After a few weeks, I said, what the fuck, I'm just going to go in there and make amends. So I went in there, asked one of the checkers, hey, where's the manager? He says, upstairs. I go upstairs, I go in, I say, hey, listen, I used to live around here, I stole a lot of stuff, I want to give you $55, and because I'm in the program recovery. Yeah. Then when I left, as soon as I left, I never thought of Rossi's Market again. Yeah. First, the example of how the failed system deals with something. Avoid it at all costs. Fucking keep a security guard watching. Don't let, you know. And then doing it another way, which is just fess up, tell the truth, let go of the results. And therefore, all that space that was occupied by Rossi's Market is open now and available for what? The loving presence. So then that's 9. 10 is to continue to take personal inventory. Basically, just to see, for me, the patterns of self, how it defeats you. And also to see what's beautiful about doing inventories is they lead you to the point where you don't have to do inventories. There was this subdivision of AA in San Francisco called the Pod People. They were very strange characters. And they used to do a thing. They'd do all the 12 steps in a letter, all at once. And all day they'd walk around with a book and write every fear that come up, writing fears. And they'd have their own meetings. It was very strange. But they would come and see me at this 4-step worship and sort of attack me. And they want to talk to me, and they go, you know, I think you're misleading people about the fear. And I said, I don't want to be the greatest manager of fear. I want to outgrow fear. I don't want to be a fucking, oh, I can deal, you know, in 10 seconds. I don't want to have any. That's the whole point. The whole point of AA is freedom. Yeah? And what's the greatest thing about a tool is when you don't need to use it. So I did a lot of inventory, so I don't need to do inventory now. Yeah, and when it comes up, it happens in the head. I know what to do, talk to someone, and I make an amend. And it's over. Can you imagine how, if the shelf is clear, it'll be obvious when the 1 can of beans is put up. You'll notice it very quickly because the shelf is clear. Yeah? You're available, you're present. And to me, that's what service is. You do service. And when you do service in AA, you feel available. You feel bigger or larger or something. It gives you a sense of bigness. And then in that bigness, you sense the presence of whatever you want to call it. Now, but the habit is to go back up the ass of self. To the point you need like a divine proctologist to pull you out. But your habit is to go back up. Yeah, because it's the act of being identified. You're taking yourself to be the problem. But what happens if you come out enough, and then one time you're doing service, the availability is occurring, and then you sense the presence, and the emphasis is on the presence. Not on the idea of you that was doing the service, but the presence. And suddenly, you are the presence, which means you're available at all times, which means you're of service. Now that's unbelievable. For a while you're doing service, and then suddenly you're of service. That's the possibility of recovery. That's the program. The program says we know but a little. People who come after are going to add on to it. We're the people that came after. The people, when the book was read, they had 4 years. Some people in this room may have 40 years. All right, so 11, it says to improve your through prayer and meditation, improve your conscious contact. So, in a way, the thing is, the means is prayer and meditation, but the end is to improve your conscious contact. If your conscious contact improves, it's not just through meditation and prayer, it's through everything you freaking do. Surf, swim, work, every time. The options, there's just not 2 avenues to improve your conscious contact. When the conscious contact is improved, there's a different basis happens. Just being conscious is in its of itself its own improving. Yes? It reinvigorates itself. You don't have to maintain it. It's always on. Yes? You don't, it's on completely. So then what 12 is basically just aligning yourself with AA's agenda. Yeah? AA's agenda is to practice these principles in all your affairs. And if you can't do it in all your affairs, limit your affairs. And then help other people to achieve sobriety. That's the agenda. So now you've adopted AA's way of life. You have not changed yourself. You've submitted yourself to be changed. And so you have. Not you, but the alcoholism. The alcoholism gets changed. We submit ourselves to be changed. We're not changing anything. We submit ourselves to be changed. When we turn our will and life over to the carer, or when we do step 6 and 7, it's like putting the garbage out at night on Tuesday when the garbage man comes Wednesday. You have faith the garbage man's coming. You don't sit up all night waiting, oh, is he coming, is coming. You just turn it over, and that's all your jurisdiction. And then, because the whole point is not for everything to get great for me, but for me to be of maximum use. And I don't know what that's going to look like or entail. Yeah? That to me are the 12 steps. Tonight, in an hour, I'd say it differently right now. Because that's the livingness of the steps. The livingness of the steps can be captured every freaking moment that you're living the steps. And it may be a little different. I don't have a fucking tablet with the steps on it. I've been living under the steps and the principles AA for 30 years, and they have produced an effect. Yeah? And you know the most beautiful thing of all of it is when acceptance floods in. When acceptance now becomes the atmosphere you live in, not that fucking slave driving, having to get better and critiquing. No, you've recognized the Urban Renewal Project is canceled. You've recognized at best this is a utilitarian thing. It's not the chariot of the gods. You are of spirit. As Jesus says, you're in this world, you're in this body, you're in this time, you're in this thing, but you're not of this world, you're not of this body, you're not of time. Yeah? So this is taken care of quite well. It knows what it likes to eat. It doesn't need a lot of surveillance. I'm not burning houses down. I'm just chewing cud here and there, getting a coffee or a thrift store. It's nothing to write home about. So when you needed to be highly observant, you weren't, and now you should be free. You're fucking highly observant. What are my motives? Fuck. Do you think when you do service, if you feed somebody, here's someone going, I think I'm embellishing myself when I do service. The person who's getting the sandwich you're handing them doesn't give a shit. He wants the sandwich. Fucking stop. Oh, I better stop doing service. Fuck that. That's obsession itself. The service is being delivered. Your narrative about who, what, that's all the selfing. It's the disease talking to you as you. And so the next message, this next part of the talk, I don't even know how it came about. All I tried, because I come from this tribe, was to share. Because I saw I could affect people. And so when you see that you have a value, you offer it, yeah? And the type of person I am, I'll do for AA what I wouldn't do for myself. AA brings the best out of me, and what it brought was I was able to describe and articulate people things that they feel, but they can't describe and articulate. So I just was put to use in AA. But what happened is we made a website one day, which was a big mistake, and then people got some of these downloads, and from outside of it got in touch with me. And then I did interviews on the internet, not being up to date. My anonymity was gone, because my face was there, and I just said, the cat's out of bed, fuck it after that. But I did these interviews with thing, and then I got cornered into this niche of non-duality. But I arrived there. Yeah. I didn't study it. I arrived there. I arrived at non-duality, not as a topic. Something had fundamentally changed when I saw I wasn't a thing. Yeah? And so I started speaking to other groups, and then what I found was spiritual addiction. At first, the first groups I went to that weren't recovery, I wasn't motivated to speak. I said, hey, these fucking people have it pretty good, you know? They're not fucking living on the streets and fucking... But then I realized, Jesus, they're fucking really ill. And then the thing is, with the spiritual disease, the spiritual addiction, there's no intervention. No one's going to come and say, oh, you got to leave the spiritual meeting. Come on, put the DVD down, stop. No, they're going to let you go on 30 retreats. They're going to let you buy 50 fucking books. They're going to let you go running around, looking. Yeah. It's an illness. Just like them all. They're all driven by self-centeredness. But they're all dumbfounded by the statement, self can't get out of self. When you're identified as self, you don't know you're identified as self. So now you call self something like the ego, and you attempt to get out of it, but you're trying to get out of the real problem as the problem. That's the problem. Yeah? So in non-duality, all that happens is, non-duality, if you've never heard it, or if you have, I'm just going to give you my take on it. Non-duality just means not to. Yes? Not to. It's called a negation. It's not called an affirmation. It's not talking about what is, it's really talking about what isn't. Yeah? Because its belief is what is identified as what isn't. So by talking to what is about what isn't, what is goes, hey, I may not be that. But while you're talking to what is about what isn't is claiming to be the hero. Yes? This is the dilemma. So when I do a talk like this, I'm not talking to you. I'm throwing the message over your head, because if that which we are is everywhere, I don't have to throw it far. Yeah? Throw it over your head with the hopes that the mind catches it. Because I know the mental state, claiming to be you, has a huge defense. It has like 1,000 bits, and it's catching every message. So here we are, all lions, yes? All lions. Now many of the lions in this room, just as an example, I'm not saying, I'm not saying anything, but many of the lions in this room are taking themselves to be a sheep. Yeah? So this lion is coming here, and the sheep see it as a sheep, but I don't see it as a sheep. Yeah? And I don't see you as a sheep. So there's a lion, a lion, a lion. So what I do is, I just say, hey, you're a lion. You're a lion. And now the lion in you goes, oh yeah. You feel something, and so here's the message. You're a lion. You're a lion. You're a lion. Pretty direct. But when it hits this area, the sheep program claims it and says, I can become like a lion. You see? That's not the message. So there's no point in talking to the sheep about the lion, because the only way the sheep can entertain it is I can become like one. Yeah? I'm talking to the lion about the sheep, because you're not a sheep. Yeah? All that the lion needs to hear is that it's not a sheep. It doesn't need to hear, as a sheep, how great it is to be a lion. It'll just try to be a sheep, be a lion as a sheep. It needs to hear about a sheep, so maybe it triggers it and goes, hey, I'm not a sheep. What happens? Does it become a lion? No, it is a lion. Does it have to take 3 weeks of roaring lessons? No, it roars. Yeah? There's nothing else it does. Once it sees it's not a sheep, it doesn't have to look to be a lion. It is a lion. This is the whole point of non-duality. The whole point of non-duality is there's not two. And right now, as we're sitting here, we're exhibiting two-ness. Sometimes you're thought about as an object, sometimes you're cast as the thinker. So the subject is thinking, and then sometimes you're the object being thought about, in like each other second. This is called two-ness. This is called dualism. Non-duality is negating that. Non-duality, so dualism, if the light in undifferentiated light comes through dualism, it gets split, yeah? And that's what we see as duality. Yes, no, hot, cold, this, that, male, female, yeah? It's like two ends of a pole. So here it goes. Here how it appears is seeing occurs, hearing occurs, feeling occurs, tasting occurs, smelling occurs. The mental state claims to be the seer, and now seer is seer seen, hearing is hearer heard, feeling is feeler felt, tasting is taster tasted, smelling is smeller smelt. Yes? That is, first one is life's happening, the second one is an interpretation, life's happening to me. That's it. That is what non-duality is directing. It's not trying to describe the lion to the lion. It's trying to describe what it looks like to be a sheep so the lion may be able to see it. Yes? Because the lion is in the activity of being identified as a sheep. It doesn't need to hear about being a lion. So the whole point of this message is I'm throwing it to the lion, yeah, and I'm going to talk about a sheep. So the lion will go, hey, wait a minute, I may not be that. That has power. Now the horse is in front of the cart. If this goes, I'm not that, it just gets more confusing. So when the sheep goes, I'm not a sheep, it's really fucked up. Yeah? It doesn't work. But if the lion says I'm not a sheep, that goes somewhere. So this is the first thing. The message is never to you, it's about a you. It's thrown to what we are, about what we're not. Yeah? Because this is the dilemma that I have seen. Most of us are in the act of being identified as what we're not. Yeah? And in some form or level, we're looking for what we are. Yeah? So we're looking for what we are from what we're not. At the same time, if the emphasis was moved, you could be seeing what you are from what you're not from what you are. So here it is. You're looking for what you are from what you're not, or you're seeing what you're not from what you are. That's it. Yeah? So you're looking for what you are from what you're not. That would be a lion identified as a sheep looking for the lion. Yeah? Or you're seeing what you're not. The lion identified as a sheep from the lion. That's the difference. That's the whole point. And it's a flavor. Once the flavor connects, it's seamless. Yeah? The correction, when the correction is made, there was no need for a correction. Because you have always been a lion. Yeah? It's not like, all right, once I'm through with the sheep, I'll start getting to be... No, you are a lion. The identification as sheep, the curling of the hair, all the barring lessons you took, all the cud you chewed, still has not made you a sheep. You're a lion, completely. I don't care if you've been used for sweaters, you're still a lion. Yeah? It doesn't matter, oh, I've lived as a sheep for 80 years, it never turned you into a fucking sheep. Never. Never. That's the point of non-duality to me. Simple. Because what it says, there's a great master who says, there's a presupposing. So look at an AA, you can get to it easier this way. The acronym for fear, false evidence appearing real. You use that around here? So that's usually what's happening in the head, yes? The head is presenting false evidence appearing real. The evidence is usually coming from what's not happening. It says you should be worried because something's going to happen in the future, or you're really fucked because something supposedly happened in the past. Basically, yeah? So you're really, the false evidence is coming from what's not happening. And it's being presented to what is real, which is us, now. So there's false evidence, and then it's presented to us, and then us as being what is happening, take it to be true, then suddenly the false evidence appears to be real to us. Yeah? That's exactly what's happening. So the mental state is presenting false evidence to what is true, which our spirit, and then it convinces us with this little story, and then suddenly the false evidence appears to be real. False evidence could not appear to be real unless it appeared to be real to what's real. How else would it appear to be real? It would have to appear to be real to what's real, yes? That's our role. We are what's real. So non-duality is just a negation of the dualism and the duality of a split mind. Yeah? And it's more I'm not that than I'm something else. And by negating what you've taken yourself to be, you find out what you are. By looking for what you are from what you're not, it reinforces what you're not. So this great master says simply, there's a presupposing of a non-existent thing, and this body is not existing unless animation, yes? Have you ever seen someone you know dead? They weren't there, were they? The body was. You were claiming the body to be them, but when the animation's gone, it's obvious it wasn't the body. I saw it with my Uncle Fred when I was young. I was brought to the casket when I was 9, looked in, saw Uncle Fred, and I said, that ain't Uncle Fred, because the body was dead, you know, there, but the animation was gone. Not gone, but not animating the body. But then in hindsight, I realized I was taking myself to be the body, so therefore I just saw the same mistake in him. But when it was corrected by the dead body, yes? Where was I? A dead body. No one's following it anyway.
Great master presupposing.
The presupposing, yeah. So the presupposing of a non-existent thing, wanting to get salvation for the non-existent thing. Just hear that, yeah? All right, the presupposing of a non-existent thing, and then wanting to get salvation for the non-existent thing. Now, if there was salvation, if there was salvation, let's say if there was salvation from a non-existent thing, wouldn't that be always available? Because it's non-existent, yeah? So it says the presupposing of a non-existent thing, then wanting to get salvation for the non-existent thing. If this is the case, the spiritual practices themselves are reinforcing the non-existent thing. How can they destroy it? You see? So there's a claiming, while we're doing an action, there's a claiming of being the actor. The bondage isn't through the action, it's using the action to imply the actor. The bondage of self. So meditation occurs, but while the meditation's occurring, the mental state is claiming to be the meditator. That's where you get bound in spirituality. To the point where if you miss a meditation, you think the whole day's going to suck. Don't you? You run home at noon. Oh, I got to get that hour in. I mean, that's not freedom. That's slavery, yes? Yeah. So the movement of the selfing, the claiming, is very fast. Supposedly in like 4 seconds, the sense of self arises. I don't believe there's any process you can do out in this world that will be before that process. So whatever you do, the mental state is going to attempt to claim it. Yeah? And if you don't know it, you'll be looking from its effects. So the whole point of this meeting is to just show you the diagram of the basic heist of the mental state. Because in this thing, you're the burglar, you're the policeman, you're everything. Yeah? So if you see it, there's a possibility. The heist, the pantomime of the heist will continue, but there'll be no fucking money. Your interest and attention will not be in it, yes? You'll be free from the bondage of self. So the whole act of selfing, I didn't get this to this in AA. This is good, I like this. Do the one talk, go into this. I have a term called selfing. If you're interested, go to Zen Bitch Slap on YouTube, Paul Hedderman. There's tons of YouTubes, all for free. And I present basically the same case every time, just in 1,000 different ways. Yeah? But one of the terminologies I use is selfing, which I would say is the act of being identified as a self. Yeah? And that self is seen as a body, but the attributes that really bind you is the doership, the thinkership, the feelership, yes? The claiming of seeing, hearing, feeling, the thinking, all that. That's really the bondage. The body represents it. So when you think of yourself as the thinker, you think of yourself as the body. When you feel like you're the feeler, you feel yourself as the body. When you sense that you're the doer, you feel like you're the doer as the body. Yeah, so the body is the way to, is the true convincing here. But the claiming, the selfing is more about ownership. So shit you have nothing to do with it says you have a lot to do with it. You check the language, have you? I've come here, we used it a lot. I hadn't been in New York for a long time. Came to do a talk. A guy who'd seen me before says, "Hey, Paul, you're growing your hair." And so I was sitting there, I go, "Yeah, I'm growing my hair. I'm doing really good. It's looking pretty good." And he was balding. I said, "You're not doing good, bro." And I said, I go to this hair growing class once a week, and we get together for 3 hours, and seems to be doing good. I got a ½ an inch a month now. And I got a lot of pride about my hair, and fucking, love wind, wind, and stuff like that. But in fact, all I had to do was not cut it. I had nothing to do with growing my hair. But the language sounds like it, yeah? So I'm in the water surfing, my knee goes out. I haven't surfed since. I had 2 operations on this. But when I would tell people what happened, oh, I hurt my knee. It sounds like I went in the water with a hammer, and boom, boom, boom. It sounds like I did the hurting of the knee. I didn't, yeah? The language is supporting the selfing completely. It's like you're living with a hypnotist. It's constantly saying you have a lot to do with shit you have nothing to do with. Literally, literally. So the idea of selfing is the act of being identified as a self. It's not a verb and a noun. The whole thing's a verb. So this is the whole thing. If you could see it, it would really be cool. So this guy in LA has seen me many times. So I was there speaking, and he says, "All right, Paul, instead of calling it selfing, let's call it Pauling, you know?" And he says, "All right, Pauling, on a bad day, how much is Paul Pauling? Is it 80%, 50%? When you're really having a good day, is it 10%? And he goes on and on. I said, no, you miss it. There isn't a Paul Pauling. There's the Pauling that implies the Paul. You see, you come after. The feeling of being you comes after the presupposing. So the supposing presupposes itself to before. So here you go. The head is selfing, yeah? You buy it, yeah? Suddenly the self is produced, and then you feel like you've been selfing. But the selfing is actually implied the self. But then as soon as the self is implied, it owns the selfing. You see?
Yes.
So thought, same thing. The thought is claimed. The thought implies the thinker. Suddenly the thinker had the thought. Feeling happening. The feeling is claimed. Yes? Suddenly the feeling implies the feeler. Now the feeler has all the feelings of the whole day. Or 40 years, 50 years. Same thing. Action, acting. Actions happen. The actions are used to imply the actor. Now you're bound to all the actions. Yes, this is how it works. It's a robbery in time. That which comes after says it's before. It's actually even leaped before consciousness. Because now when seeing happens, you feel you're the seer, doesn't it? Don't you feel like you're the one who's conscious? Don't you? Don't you feel like you as a body is conscious? Because you feel like you're the seer, you feel like you're the hearer, you feel like you're the taster, you feel like you're the toucher, you feel like you're the smeller, yes? And all that gets attributed to the body, so when you feel like all those things, you feel like a fucking body. That's the bondage of self. The bondage of self is an activity. You can see it because you are incredibly complete stillness. You can see the activity from the stillness. You can't see the activity from the activity. That's part of the activity. But what you are as spirit is not of time. You're not of time. You are timeless. So therefore, what's ever happening, you're there before it ever even happens. You can see the birth of selfing every day. And if you see it, you won't call it you, and therefore you won't be bound. So when you call a thought yours, the thought has you. When you own a thought, the thought suddenly owns you. When you own a feeling, the feeling owns you. It can ruin your day. That's cut off. And in recovery, you're like a free-range alcoholic now. You're free. You're free from the bondage of self. So non-duality, to me, is not a path at all. I don't even think you can use it as skillful means. It's just a fact. Yeah? It's just stating a fact. There's no two. There's no subject-object. There's no this or that. It's just just nothing and everything. It's just what is, yes? And then this little charade is appearing in it. But it seems like because we're identified with the body, our interest and attention is focused on this little character, and we're missing the whole huge stage. It's sort of like that old statement: "You missed the forest from the trees." You missed you missed the forest from the trees. We're so identified with the singularity, we don't see the wholeness of it all. Well, we'll never see the wholeness, but we'll see from the wholeness. Yeah. So I think they really beautifully work well because AA, as in the life of the action figure, has brought us to some incredibly clear understandings that we wouldn't normally entertain, which is, hey, any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Yeah? that self is what has defeated us. We have to be convinced of all things, of these things. We've already done all that, yeah? We've seen enough of the foreign installment. Yeah? This idea of, if you see something that's not real, see, you don't have to vanquish the non-existent thing. It never existed. You don't have to be worried it's going to resurrect. It never resurrected. It can't re-resurrect. It's non-existent. It's you casting a shadow and taking yourself to be the shadow, basically, and then trying to look for you. Any questions? Yeah. Yes.
Okay, let's see how I want to put this here. I'm sitting here thinking, well, this person, this self, is 31 years clean sober, 35 years doing the Course in Miracles, blah, 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 Rage Alcoholics Anonymous, Suicide Anonymous, and I spent the whole day angry and service people on the phone.
What does that tell you?
That nothing's working. That's what it says to me. But I only know to acknowledge my feelings. Like you said in the beginning of the talk, you said be accountable. Not responsible, but
yes.
accountable.
Yeah. So
the only thing I know to do is go, I am accountable for these feelings.
But it's time to move on from that. You've been accountable enough.
If I go, oh, don't be angry, it's what you said, then you're just, there's something happening, and I'm going, don't be it. Don't be it.
No, you see, it doesn't work. No.
I think I can't get.
Just ask you a simple question. Just then, if you're having difficulty, just use a subjective question. Who is it that thinks it's angry? And when it says
well, I would say my ego.
Well, then when it says that, ask that. Who's that ego? Yeah,
it's
just
nothing.
ask it.
It's
well,
nothing. It's not
go.
real.
Just hit. It's sort of like if it has a reaction. Answer it, ask it again until there's no reaction. Then after, it's sort of like going to a house. If you knock on the door 1,000 times and no one comes to the door, it's pretty obvious no one's home. Yeah? This is what happens. This whole pretense of you is paper thin. If you turn the attention that it's directing outward, if you turn it on itself, by a simple subjective question and keep the pressure on. Don't take its first fucking answer. Just, you know what I mean? You got the serial killer and then did you do it? No, and then let him go. You know, you have tons of evidence. You know, okay, ask him another question, yeah? Turn it this way. Because I'll tell you, if the anger isn't yours, you'll lose interest in the whole story of being angry. Tell you the truth.
Wait, what do you do when you feel a feeling?
Feel the feeling?
That's what I'm saying.
I can't help myself. That's what happens.
Right, and then just say, God, please take this.
No, I don't say anything really.
This feeling.
No, because there's another feeling coming. I'm just, of course, constantly. It's sort of like I don't have time to observe the river while I'm in the river. Yes. It's like someone going to the Colorado River, getting a glass of water, and think they have the river. The essence they lost is the rivering. I'm feeling something all fucking day. I can't. If I stop to observe that, it's like 8 more have arrived. Yeah?
Right.
Just go with the flow. The reason why it seems so important because it has some idea about you. You don't give a shit if someone else was angry, do you? Not much, unless they were in a relationship with you. Yeah? You don't care that much, but because it has something to do with you, I shouldn't be angry. Do you say that about everyone? They shouldn't, no, you just fucking, it's, the importance of it is lent to it because of the idea of being you. If you see it as not you, see, I used to use this thing in the workshops. Put anger up here, right? Anger. Let's say anger, let's say shame, anger, shame, resentment, all right? Everyone would there be some kind of feeling would be triggered by looking at those words. I'm gonna change the words completely without changing the letter of them. My anger, my resentment, my whatever I said, I don't know, is totally different. Yes? Anger is anger. My anger is fucking a lifetime story. Yes? A resentment can't even, it comes and goes. My resentment is fucking 300 years old or something, 20, 30, 50 years old. I've given it life. I'm breathing into it all day. Fuck, I won't let it die because it's an excuse from all my other fucking situations. Like, you can't die on me, then I may have to face up to something. No, resentment. Or fear. The breath of fear, the power of fear comes from the mind, not fear. The my is the power. You may not be aware of it, but the mental state is quite aware of how powerful we are because it's directing it to its own ends completely. It couldn't, its production couldn't even get to off Broadway. It's our lighting, it's our attention, it's our interest that fuels its fucking production. And it doesn't have a life, it gets to have ours by presenting itself as us. So when you see it in your life, you call it me. It's got carte blanche access to everything because you think it's you. And I mean the emphasis is on think. The only way you, as what you are, could be you, that which you're not, is seemingly by thinking. That's the only way it goes. And it only can appear to be true. It's not true. It's not true. If this ever hits you strongly, it tells you it's always been this way. Nothing ever fucking actually happened. Every night, you know what totally just bothering you right now will be forgotten when you go to sleep tonight. I used to do these talks in AA 16 years, every Monday night. So that's a lot of Monday nights. I had a lot of different conditions in a lot of those Monday nights. Some Monday nights, my girlfriend just broke up with me before I went in to do the meeting. Back then, when I got sober, when you got a test for AIDS, it took 3 weeks to get the return back. And I had a lot of evidence I could probably have AIDS because intravenous user and everything like that. I had no money at times, sinus infections, flu, but I went to those meetings. And I'm a believer in AA that I don't believe that you have to have it and give it away. I believe if you're willing to give it away, you'll have it. That's the way I see it works. So I would go to these meetings and I'd be open to be used and something would come through. And all those things that were pressing on me all day just disappeared for that hour. Didn't feel the need, didn't feel the sinus, didn't feel this, didn't feel my bank account, the AIDS, no AIDS, nothing. And then after the talk, they'd all re-engage. But after time, the demonstration, I said, how could something that was real disappear that fast? It ain't real. It needs, when my attention was drawn away, it's as if it never existed, just like alcoholism. When your attention is directed by something, see the head, in the Course in Miracles, some people know the Course here, yeah? In the Course in Miracles, it says on page 468, 69, one of my favorite riffs, it says, the brain interprets to the body. So the brain is collating all this information and it's interpreting this whole thing to the body, yeah? That's what it does. The brain interprets to the body. So now, and so here's the brain infected with alcoholism, yeah? Now, the brain's interpretation is actually being directed by the alcoholism. So you're seeing, you're the field of the alcoholism manifesting. You have tons of fucking resentments. You have a mimicking of fear built on mental anxiety because you have total faith in the thoughts and the thoughts are telling you it's going to be terrible next week. So you're fucking feeling like you're getting a slight shock all day. Feels like fear, but it's not coming from what's happening. It's what's not happening. The whole thing is empowered, yeah? Empowered. So what happens? You come in AA and you turn it over to a higher power, or in the Course in Miracles, it's the Holy Spirit. It takes the same material, exact same material, but it translates it differently. It interprets it differently. The dream becomes happier. Yes? Forgiveness becomes available to the point you arrive at atonement where you see nothing ever happened to even be forgiven. Yeah? The same information, but what's collating it is differently. The mental state interprets to the body completely. The mental state has alcoholism. Whoa. Yeah? The higher power interprets it differently. The higher power, called the Holy Spirit, interprets it differently. Yes? It all gets regurgitated and downloaded, and you live from it. You're an expression. You're not the doer and the cause. You're expressing how everything is getting dilated, taken in. Yeah? Collated and interpreted, and you're living out that interpretation. When you had alcoholism and addiction, you lived like a fucking perfect addict. Now you have another download, and you're living like a recovered person. You're neither of them. You're an expression. And it's tactile. It's not a freaking idea. It's tactile. It's a loving sense of presence. You're awake to being awake. Really, what you're awake to is you're awake to what you're not, basically. That's how you have a sense of real being awake, is you're not trying to be awake as what you're not, you're awake to what you're not. Yeah? Yeah. And then you don't ever get gypped. You don't believe you can be out of the moment, so you're not driven to try to get into the moment. Because you can't be out of the moment. And also, conversely, you're not trying to get out of something you can't be in. You're not trying to get out of self because you can't be in self. And you're not trying to get into the moment because you can't be out of the moment. And you're not trying to look for what you are from what you're not. You're seeing what you're not from what you are. It's all the backwards. The cart is now behind the horse, and now blue is blue and red is red, and things make fucking sense. And you feel it in your gut, and you know before knowing. And it reverberates continually because you're continually on. There's no on and off switch. You have nothing fucking to do with it. You're awake without any volition. That's how it goes. And then what? You show up in Doylestown. You get surprised by how many people are here. Yeah? Look around for water, and one shoe's too tight because that foot got run over. So you feel tons of shit. Yeah? You hear crickets, you hear that whirring of the fans, you're awake. There's seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, and there's not much collating going on, really. It's just like a wind tunnel. Yeah? And then you can feel the presence in rooms of AA. Look at what happens at meetings in AA. If you took all the people individually, they're just a bunch of assholes. But if you put them collectively, they produce a sweet bouquet. There's a loving power expressing itself through our group conscience right now. You don't feel it in this room? There's a juice here. It's not yours or mine. It's just here. And don't pin anything on me. I have nothing to do with this at all. I'm like the most unenthusiastic deliverer of a message. Because I realized long ago I'm not going to get fucking anything out of it. I have not get anything out of this thing. And that's the greatest gift of all. To get nothing on a constant basis is fucking great. Because it turns into everything, really. You got to stick with it a little while though, because the urge for something is strong. But if you can just stay with nothing, yeah, nothing. You don't have to throw another log on the fire. You don't have to try to just leave it alone, man. It's self-igniting. Just let it be. You've been served a subpoena, and you'll be called to court. But it won't be the court of the mental state. You've been convicted there already. You're just living out a sentence there. But you'll be called to the court of light, and all your seeming transgressions will be annulled, as if they never happened. Yes? Yes, yes.
How long have you grown your hair?
I have a traveling hairstylist. He was off today, though. It usually looks a lot better than this. I don't have my regular moisturizers. in cream. I have some people like the Jesus look. I'm sort of caught by my followers now. I can't get a haircut. They want me to look like a West Coast Jesus person. I don't know.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is
A lot.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to boil it down to one kind of like idea. It's for me, I've always tried to find out who I am because I want to see who I am and the reason why I did the things that I did. So you're saying that I should stop looking for.
Well, look at who you're not.
By seeing who I'm not, and I find out who I am.
Yes. Yeah. See, you can't study what you are because you're it. Yeah. You can't know what you are because you're it. You can't experience what you are because you're it. Yes. So, but you can know what you're not. You can study what you're not, and you're experiencing what you're not all day. Yeah. But the possibility about us, we have only one possibility, and that's being it. Yeah? So the only way, if you don't have that sense of being it, a weird way of sort of arriving there is through negation. You negate what you're not, and then you find out what you are, instead of looking for what you are from what you're not. Many of us have done that. It's a failed system. This is just a simple correction.
So it's always the after effect of seeing what you're not that you find out what you are.
Yes. In a way, you see what you're not, and it's the seeing of what you're not, that's what you are. So the act of seeing intimates something. You can't, it's not like you know it, because being it, I can't really explain the flavor of it, but there's a flavor to it. And the flavor, the way it seems to become obvious to me is in the seeing of what I'm not. I get a hit of what I am, yeah, because I'm the seeing of what I'm not, yeah. So everything you can see, you're not, in a way. Like there's a great Zen master. If you ever want to read a book, a very short book, called The Teachings of Huang Po. You can get it for like 9 cents, I think, on Amazon or something. And it's an old book. And this guy was a master in like 1200s or something. What I like about him is one of his followers was a scribe for the emperor's court, like a writer. So his talks were written that night, not like 300 years later. So this guy caught the talk when it was happening, and wrote it down. So he would say some beautiful things. He would say, whatever can be perceived cannot be perceiving. So we're all off the game board. Yeah? As the perceiving, where this is not the perceiving. Whatever can be perceived cannot be perceiving. And then he was the famous one that said, you cannot use the Buddha to seek the Buddha. You cannot use mind, big M mind, to seek mind. You cannot use light to seek light. Now, if you weren't the Buddha, he wouldn't have said it. Yeah? He wouldn't say it to Steve, Mary, Jill, Joe, Bill. But Steve, Mary, Jill, Joe, Bill are AKA the Buddha. So he was talking over Steve, Mary, whatever, over the head, hoping for the Buddha to hear, hey, Buddha, you can't use yourself to find yourself. But as Steve, it's doing just that. Yeah? So being identified as Steve, the Buddha is using itself to find itself. I don't think you need a 500-page dissertation. It's obvious there's something off there, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, the greatest scriptures are one sentence. So you can't use the Buddha to seek the Buddha. So what he was saying, in a way, he was talking to Bill and Jim and Mary, because unbeknownst to Bill and Jim and Mary, the Buddha is there. Yeah? Never has not been the Buddha. Yeah? But what's hearing and receiving everything and claiming to be the hearer of the message, you can't use the Buddha, is Steve. Now that confuses Steve, because Steve has been practicing Buddhism to try to get some attributes he thinks the Buddha had, and he figures, I don't have them, so I better do what, practicing 30 years, and now he has a lot of investment in Buddhism, so he may not want to hear, you can't use the Buddha to seek the Buddha, because Steve may have gotten this little weird feeling that that's exactly what he's been doing for 30 years. And that's not going to go over well to Steve. It isn't. I'm telling you, I've watched it before in live. So the thing is, I'm saying here, obviously, Huang Po wasn't a sadist or he wasn't trying to fuck you over. He saw the Buddha in all of us, and he was talking to the Buddha. Yeah, Buddha, aka Steve. You can't use yourself to find yourself. Yeah, that's the message. That's the whole message of non-duality, really. We're using the light to find the light. We're using mind to find mind. Yeah, we're using the Buddha to seek the Buddha. There's something fundamentally flawed there. Or in AA, we're using self to get out of self. Yeah? Or self is using us to get out of self, which means self can't get out of self. Well, the Buddha can't find the Buddha with the Buddha, because it is the Buddha. Yeah? The huge difference is you can find anything that's not you. But you can't apply looking for you if you're you. You can't. Yeah? You can apply looking for everyone, any other you, but I can't go out looking because I'm what's looking. I can't use the looking to find what's looking because I'm in the act of what's looking right now. I'm gonna try to, no, I'm not gonna, oh, I found what's, no. I'm so in what's looking, I can't find what's looking, yes? It's so ever-presently what's looking, I can't freeze it in time to find what's looking. So the only thing we're relegated to do is be it. So you just roll with the fucking flow. And you realize this whole, the mental landscape up here is made up of nouns and verbs. All there is verbing. The nouns are derived from claiming verbs. There is no noun doing a verb. The verb is used to claim there's a noun. Get to the exact nature of the wrong. Get to the causes and conditions and you'll see it. Yeah.
So the mind is a robbery of time and I am a lion.
Did you? Great. I didn't hear you, but I don't need to. Good. I lost it somewhere. I can't hear anything. Fantastic. Anyone, any other questions? None about my hair anymore. My hair.
What's looking is what's looking for.
Hmm?
What's looking is what's looking for.
No, what's looking is what you're looking for.
What? Okay.
Yeah, that's why you can't find it. This looking is blindness to what's seen. If you use this, if you lose self-centeredness, which is a form of looking, to find what you are, you're blind to it because you are what's looking. Yeah? I can't say it any, I can, but it's sort of like, this is how it goes. It's like almost a spiritual chiropractor. You just want to, because as soon as something's said, it goes out. And then hopefully you hope it sets, yeah? And then the muscles and the mental muscles will get around it. Yeah. And then the logic will become very suspect. And you'll leave the world of noun and verbs and start living more verbing. And I swear you're more of that than nouns. Yeah? The description of what you are as consciousness is much more apt than your little historical story as a figure with memories and shit like that. All that, you know how much all that is needed to bolster the idea of you as a body? Tons of fucking memories, tons of thoughts. That which you are doesn't have any fucking advertising. It just is. Yeah.
A question on similar to macro question is you listen to, we understand the most of what you say, most of us I would assume, and a lot of us have probably read or studied or learned other things. I don't think it's allowed because they didn't ask for it. Right, Buddhism, or all these things. What the right thing, how to change yourself and be better and all that jazz, right? makes sense. And then life gives you a beating, and you don't have time to, it just seems like you just engage life. And from your, I'm wondering, from your experience with others, as maybe you've seen others try to learn from you and these things, is there some type of insight that helps us maybe get to a better place where we're struggling with life itself?
Yeah, you know what happens? You lose interest in getting to the better place. And that becomes a better place. That's what happens. You lose interest in improving and getting better and stuff like that. You do. You really do. I mean, I'm in a, it's not a super comfortable situation. I mean, if I was down on the streets, then there would be a drive and a motivation as the action figure. But really the greatest gift as coming out of here is acceptance, really, of just like not being moved, not every day a call to arms. It's more disarming, yeah? I mean, yeah. As they say in AA, Rule 62, don't take yourself so seriously. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. See, if you tried not to take yourself so seriously, that would be taking it seriously. But you actually, that's actually a description of an effect. You just, you stop taking yourself so seriously. And when something is intolerable, you act accordingly. Yeah? But for me, the biggest felt difference was acceptance, really. Like, because I felt like a hand in my back always pushing me forward. A drive to have to change something, or me, or another person. A constant, like the starting point would be a denial or a disagreement instead of acceptance. And now that's been changed, yeah. So, yeah. So now I'm accepting the fact that I'm over talking. It's coming to me right now. One more question or something? No, yes? Well, I'll have two.
Do you feel like practice is just kind of chasing your tail, and that if you're mapped for self-realization, it's just going to happen when it happens?
Well, again, it matters, yeah? Whatever that thing you were saying could be an expression, or it could be used as a means to get somewhere. I think as an expression is fine. I don't know what your calling will be. You'll know your seed assignment. Maybe you'll be more interested in that stuff. But for me, it was the other way. I just lost all interest in it. I had trouble with my digestion at one time for a while. And I did all this stuff, and I sent my shit to this laboratory called Mount Something Lab in Tennessee. It's famous in the New Age world in like the 80s or something. And to have my shit checked out to see something must be wrong. And I was really excited. They sent me a thing, and I checked what I wanted them to look for. Of course, everyone always parasites first. You're taken over already by a parasite, but you're afraid of parasites. I'll make sure I don't have any parasites. You're a huge parasite. And so I checked all these things off, and then about a week or two, they sent the stuff back, and I had, for that last year, I was buying this probiotic from Canada that they sold at Whole Foods. It would be in like these little milk things, 6 of them for like $42. Drink them once a week, with like 6 trillion beneficial intestinal flora, right? So I've been putting like 6 trillion, 50 trillion migrants of intestinal flora into my little civilized intestine. So I packed it in with like a bazillion citizens of beneficial flora. So I get the return, and no parasite, thank God. And I look at signs of beneficial flora, 0.000%. I said, what the fuck? I poured trillions of fucking... Where did they go? I didn't see them migrate out. They didn't come out that way. And then I read the next paragraph. You have 2 bacteria in your system that love beneficial flora. So basically, I was catering to the fucking 2 bacteria. Like high gourmet, trillions of what they love, paying for it. They never even had to call the fucking restaurant. I delivered for a year. So in a way, you could do a test on me now to see if there's any spirituality in me, and there's 0.0000 signs of spirituality. There's absolutely no signs of spirituality. To me, I think it's complete success. I do, because there was a lot of it that had to get out. It's all gone as if it never was there. I mean, my interests are so meager, you know. I'm wondering if the Yankees won tonight or something, you know. It's like, oh, I'm gonna get those Marlins, and no, it's nothing like that.
Oh my God.
I'm not, you know, it's obvious you're awake. It's obvious you're awake. Aren't you on right now? I'm not trying to be on. I'm on like completely, like bright. Everyone is. I think most of us, in the attempts of being awake, are trying to not be awake, really. To tell you the truth. I mean, it's not nice to be awake if you're awake as a self to all those thoughts at 3 in the morning. I mean, that's the whole pharmaceutical business, is to really limit awakeness, because we can't take it. Because it's what we're awake on, or what we're obsessed over, is fucking driving the agitation into a fucking fury. That same light of awakening, if it was directed by something other than a mental state, is what you call abidance in truth. That's the ever brilliant light. Yeah? It just matters what's directing it. So, yeah. Your arm should be falling off. So yes. One more question.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just I really appreciate. I have to leave actually. First of all, thanks for being here. And
Thank you for having me.
yeah, when you were talking about the parasite, you know, back when we were talking about recovery,
Yeah.
And that when we were stricken with alcoholism, you know, that parasite is really driving us to do what we did. And I just wanted to hear a little more about that, like, because it really felt like I had this moment where I could just like leave it, because I've been through so many 4 steps and 9 steps and steps, but always I've been carrying the guilt still from.
Yes, see, that's it. Because see, below the alcoholism is the addiction to self. And the addiction to self's biggest plank is the doership. So you can get recovery from alcoholism, and you may not get recovery from self. Yeah? You can see it. The self still is dominant. The idea of you being the doer is still the basis of all the harvesting of guilt and shame, based on shit you didn't really do, you were driven to. You still can't get free from it, because the underlying, the original addiction is the mental state's addiction to self. Alcoholism affixes on that. You get recovered from alcoholism, you don't get recovered from that. The amplification goes down, but it still thrives. But if you can get to that, then you can see the real root of the problem, which is the act of being identified as self. Yeah. And that act of being identified as self has to constantly be reinforced and reinstated by claiming the doing, and most importantly, the doing. The doing is the most convincing thing. Just like in the 5 senses, the vision is the most convincing thing of separation and things, right? Because you see things. When you listen to sound, there's no real, you can't pinpoint it from where it's coming, and you don't even know where you are. You can get lost in a sea of sound. But eyes are very, 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 very hijacked by the story here. Yeah, the vision. So the sense of doer is very, very strong in this disease of selfing. That's why even recovery doesn't relieve it. You have to see that you're not the doer. Yeah? And how do you do that is just see you see the doing being claimed, and then the doer comes after the doing. So that means the doing produced the doer didn't do the doing. Yes? Why not get the horse in front of the cart? If you have the cart in front of the horse, you're sitting in a lot of manure trying to go somewhere. Really.
That's the doo-doo.
What?
That's the doo-doo that you're trying to do.
Yes. So, yes? Yeah. Yeah, I want C in AA. I don't want any ceilings built. Yeah? You can go as far as you can entertain. AA's got a huge, huge launching pad. And it can take you as far, and it will actually not even take you, it will allow you to express what occurs. AA is a way of life that is quite, it's a great conductor of light, AA. It really is. And it gives you, to me, it's an incredible, see, I believe non-duality is, it's the illumination of whatever path you're on. It's not on a path to illumination. I'm already on a path, which is AA. Non-duality illuminates that path, yes. And because you get to the real thing, because, yeah, you saw it. You can look at, you can conceptually understand you're not the doer. You can conceptually think you've forgiven yourself, but you don't understand the source code of the action figure. Every action that ever's happened since you were about 5 on probably has been used to imply the doer. It's a very strong reinforcement. Yeah. Yes. One more. That's it then.
Yeah, I some time ago saw a program that said I was able to, if I consciously did it on a regular basis, create my day and therefore create my own reality. I think it was called What the Believe You Know or something like that, with quantum physics and all this. A lot of what you're saying reminds me of that. Have you seen that program and did you incorporate that anything?
No. I think you're already doing that. That's the thing we're not accepting. You're making your own day already. What they're mimicking and trying to give you some control over is what you're doing already. Not consciously, but as what we are. We're the dreaming of the dreaming. We just may not like it as the dreamt. But the dreaming is the dreaming. See, let's say we got here together, all of us, and we're going to join, we came here and we're going to chant for 3 days. Thank God it's not going to happen, but let's just say that we're not a body, all right? So we're all going to chant, we're not a body, we're not a body. The only thing that would chant it's not a body is a body. The only thing that wants to get out of the body experience is the body. Really, it's the brain. So while you're chanting you're not a body, you're reinforcing a body. That's the dilemma. Like it or not, you may not believe it, you'll probably find out though. If you do practices, you're going to see that the practices themselves are reinforcing the non-existent thing. How can they destroy it? And then you're going to remember this night, and maybe you'll send me a Christmas card 5 years from now. Hey, I really like what you had to say, way later, but still. Because, yes, but this is the spiritual suit. Put it on, walk around and see if it fits. Yes? If it fits, wear it. The Buddha, when you say you can't use the Buddha to seek the Buddha, when that hit me, it was like a fucking avalanche. It explained most of my adult life as a spiritual seeker. It's just like, all right, like, you know, I got caught, yes, that's it. That's what has been happening. Same thing with self can't get out of self. What's one to do but to pause and let it wash over you and reshuffle the deck. Something is fundamentally off. I saw this thing, I used to get this beautiful Buddhist magazine, Tricycle, beautiful. And then one time, there was an op-ed from a famous meditation teacher. And he says, you know, he'd been teaching meditation for 30 years. And he said, you know, it's been a really strange phenomenon this year. All of my oldest students have been getting in touch with me and saying, hey, nothing fucking happened. I closed the book, canceled my subscription. Hey, Someone who's been on the bus a long time just told me it doesn't go anywhere. I'm getting off the fucking bus. You can't do yourself out of the doer. You can't think yourself out of the thinker. It's impossible. I've tried it. People have done it a lot more than I have, but I've tried it. But one area I have taken it completely all the way, and that's drug addiction. I would match my devotion to cocaine with any great devotee in the annals of spirituality, like the monkey god, you know, I'd be right there with him. I love fucking cocaine. I'd do anything for it. I'd take anything from you to do it. I gave everything to it. Even when it treated me terribly, I still stayed there, yeah? And you know what? You cannot transcend an imaginary place. You're not going to get out of here because the here you think you're in isn't here. We're in a mental here. We're in a mental here chock full of there and then. Yesterday and tomorrow. No, the here is always available at all times. What's happening has one quality, what's not happening doesn't have, which is it's happening. You may not like it, but you're seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching right now. You never do that in the past or the future. All you see is you there, the you that you're not. Yeah, so that's it, eh? Hey, thank you so much.